Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I am Lisa with Lisa Capen Quilts, and we're going to be doing block 8 of the mystery quilt called Dream, Hope, and Love. And before we get busy sewing in today's video, I have a special slideshow that I would love to showcase in this video. Last week in block 7's video, I issued an invitation if you would like to share the progress of your mystery quilt so far to this point. I've received a lot of pictures and I cannot wait for you to see them. One of the things that I love about quilting the most is that even though we all have the same pattern, the exact same pattern, each one of our quilts looks so unique and just individualized to us as the quilt maker. Don't you just love that about quilting? Taking different fabrics, different colors, adding our own unique little touch to the quilt to make a one-of-a-kind masterpiece. And that is how I see each and every one of your quilts, a masterpiece. You have done so good. I'm so proud of you. Before I show you the slideshow, I just want to let you know that I will be putting a link to a video where it's just the slideshow. If you would like to send it to your friends and family and show them that your quilt is in a video on YouTube, or you can send them here and they can watch block 8 as well. But I will put the slideshow video all on its own, in its own little video on my channel as well. And just to let you know, if you have missed out this week of including your picture, I do know that some of you are on vacation and some of you were not able to get a picture this week. We will be doing another slideshow at the end of the quilt, and so you will have another opportunity to show off all of your hard work and dedication, and just a huge thank you to everyone who has joined along. Without you, I would not even have a channel, and so I am just so happy that we have found each other and for this community that we have created together. Now, without waiting anymore, I'm not going to keep rambling. I would love to showcase your hard work, and then we'll get busy sewing.
There's a little yellow quilt at the foot of my bed. They tuck it neath my chin at night, fluff the pillow neath my head. I hear them whisper quietly, it helps her sleep, it seems. It's the quilt my mama gave to me the day I turned 16. She wrapped it in her Sunday shawl, the one her mama made. She laid it on my dresser at the end of the day. There's a picture of a countryside, an old house and a stream on the quilt my mama gave to me the day I turned 16. Blow, north wind, blow, take me to this place. It looks so warm, it looks so safe. My memory fails me, yet I still dream of the quilt my mama gave to me the day I turned 16. It went with me to college, it kept me warm at night, and when I ventured on my own, it kept my blue heart light. I wrapped my baby day I turned 16. Now I am old, and here am I. This young girl cares for me. They say she is my daughter's child. How I long for that memory. So when I'm gone, I'll have them wrap my quilt up in my shawl and give it to this young girl who calls me Grandma. Blow, north wind, blow, take me to this.
Oh, I'm so glad that we were able to do that slideshow. Again, if you were not able to get me a picture, do not worry. We will be showcasing another slideshow at the end of this quilting series, and so we will have one more opportunity to show off all of your hard work. Now let's begin with block number 8. As we open up the binder, we'll take a quick look at last week's block number 7, called All My Love. We learned about turned applique and 3 different stitches on how to stitch down the applique hearts. And here is a block number 8. It's called Stop and Smell the Flowers. This block, when finished, will be 18.5 inches wide and 18.5 inches tall. So we're working with a squared block this week. We will be doing paper piecing at the bottom and applique with the flowers and the leaves. And I'm going to show 2 ways to do the stems. So let's get busy with a block number 8. If you're mapping along, go ahead and get your map, and we're going to look at the placement for this block. If you are mapping along with us, you will find block number 8 somewhere located in your pattern. Go ahead and cut that out on the lines, and we will look at the placement for this block. Again, our 2-inch grid set, the throw size, and we've been mapping along all of our blocks up until today. The placement for block number 8 is going to be in this large place here. It should fit exactly perfect right on the left side of our quilt and fill in all of those squares just like that. So you can see we have completed the complete left side of our quilt, and we only have these places here to fill in. We only have a few more weeks and we will have a completed quilt top. So this is our quilt so far, and now let's take a look at the pattern. As we take a look at this pattern, I just want to let you know that this week's pattern is in my Etsy shop. A link to my Etsy shop will be in the description box down below. You can jump over there, purchase your pattern, and then come back and quilt with us. This is a 7-page PDF pattern, and let's just take a quick look at everything. Of course, you have your cover page and applique instructions. You have applique templates. You'll have 2 pages of a fabric map that we will use to do the paper piecing portion of this block, and 2 pages of instructions. And anytime I have paper piecing in my patterns, the instructions tend to get a little bit longer. Now, let me bring over 2 of my finished blocks. One we'll be making with you today. That'll be my 3rd block, but I've already finished 2. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. Here we are with two of my block number 8s that are all finished, and I think they turned out fantastic. Again, I'm using my grandmother's clothing in all of my blocks, except for the muslin and the fabric that I made these stems with. Everything else in my quilt is made from clothing. Now, that has elevated the difficulty level in each one of my blocks. You know, clothing can be stretchy, and it is quite thicker than our normal cotton that we make quilts from. And so my seams are thicker, and yeah, I've had a little bit of issues using the clothing, but I still think it turned out fantastic. Now in this block we have a couple things going on. We have some paper piecing work at the bottom. We have some stems that I want to show you a little bit more about in just a minute, and we have some applique. Let's talk about the applique for just a second. I always say, do your preferred method of applique. If you want to do turned edge applique on your leaves and your flowers, awesome. If you want to do raw edge applique on your leaves and your flowers, awesome. Today I've done raw edge applique with a satin stitch around each one of my pieces, and I'm going to be showing you a way that you can conserve your fusible products that you use in applique and achieve a much softer finish when you're done. So there's going to be some tips on that. I'm also going to show you 2 different ways to do your stems. On this block here, I have a turned finish edge on my stem. I'm going to show you a picture up close of what that looks like. And then in this next block, I did a raw edge applique and did a satin stitch on the outside, and I'm going to show you that picture right here, an up close picture of what that looks like. So the raw edge applique is very simple. It's just like how you would do your flowers and leaves. Today I'm going to show you how I make small little bias tape, so that will be featured in today's video as well. And then we have the paper piecing portion of this block. Now, if you are completely new to my channel and this is the first ever video that you've ever watched, welcome first. And just let me tell you that I do have a couple mug rug videos where I show exact step-by-step on how to do paper piecing. And while I will bring you along in today's video and show you the process along the way, it won't be a full paper piecing tutorial because this is very similar to a mug rug pattern that I have already done and gave a step-by-step instruction on how to do this. So we will be bringing you along during this part, but it won't be an exact step-by-step tutorial for this. I certainly don't want to keep repeating myself in all the videos, but I really am excited to show you about the stems and a trick for saving fusible products. So those are the 2 things we will focus on, although I'm going to bring you along for everything. That part will be sped up a little bit, and I think we are ready to get started. Let's talk about this fabric map with your pattern. Alright, we're going to get busy making this block, and the first thing that I like to do is go ahead and get the paper piecing portion of the block completed and ready. That's going to require your fabric map on these 2 pages. It's going to take just a little bit of prep work to get your fabric map ready. What I like to do is cut on the solid line here and along the bottom edge of your map, and right here along this edge, and then I'll cut one of them out on the dotted line, and we're going to tape this together. So let me go ahead and cut that out. Now, because all of our print settings are different, I made this in my software true to size. However, we all know that because of print margins and the different print settings, that sometimes our printers will print things out a little bit off scale. And so I'm going to show you how I just verify that everything is the right size. Oh, let me cut off this dotted line. Just like that. When you print out your pattern, go into your settings and make sure the box that says actual size is checked, and that will help in printing out your templates and your fabric map true to size. However, because our printers add a little margin to the side, it still could vary a little bit. So I have my 2 fabric maps that are already cut out, and on this ruler, because you can't really see my cutting mat all in this picture, I've marked from the edge here to the beginning of this tape is 18.5 inches wide, and that's how long or wide our block is going to be. So just to make sure that everything is exactly the size it's supposed to be, I will place the right side of my fabric map right along that edge of the tape there, and I will bring the right side of this second paper right to the edge here and line up that bottom line so that everything is nice and straight, just like that. And you will see that because of my print margins, it printed off just a slightly tad bit smaller. Now that's not huge, and that's because of the print margins that automatically happen. But just like that, we have a perfect sized template that's 18.5 inches wide. I'm going to take some masking tape and just tape that in place, flip it over, and add another piece of tape. And then, just to finish off the preparation of this fabric map, I will go along and cut out the exact shape of the top of our map. And that will give you a map that looks just like this. And this is exactly 18.5 inches wide. And I'm hoping that that tip there helps you accurately piece together your fabric map. Once you get that cut out, join me back and we will continue on with the next part. Here we are with our fabric map already cut true to size, and everything is nice and pretty and ready to go. The very next thing that I do is pre-fold my fabric map on the solid line in between each one of these numbers, and that is your actual sewing line. And if you pre-fold your map now, that'll come in very handy when we're actually piecing all of our pieces onto the map. And so go ahead and pre-fold as straight and exact as you can get it, all of your lines, and then we'll meet back. Now that we have our fabric map all prepared, everything is true to size and pre-folded, we're going to set this aside and let's go over the other materials that you need for this block. You would need a background fabric of 18.5 inches wide and 18.5 inches tall. Again, I am just using a natural colored muslin for mine. It's folded in half, but everything is pre-cut and ready to go. And then you will need lots and lots of scraps, and so see my pile here? Scrap fabrics that are slightly larger than your template pieces. And to keep in mind that we're making 3 flowers, and so you'll need 3 pieces that are this large, 3 pieces that are this large, and 3 pieces for the center of your flower. You will need 2 pieces for your leaves and a piece or 3 pieces for your stem. So go ahead and make sure you have all the fabrics that you need for the applique portion. And then you will also need scrap pieces of fabric that are slightly larger than each one of the positions on your fabric map. So that is a lot of little scraps we're going to use up from our stash today. And I think that is everything that we will need. Now, of course, if you're going to do raw edge applique, you will need your favorite kind of fusible. You could also do freezer paper applique. In that case, you would need freezer paper. And you could do turned applique, and however you like to do that. So let me go ahead and set things up. I think to get ready, like I mentioned before, I like to go ahead and do the paper piecing portion of any block that I'm working on and get that done. So I will set up my sewing machine and my pressing board and my cutting surface so that you can watch me step by step along the way of the paper piecing of block 8. Let's begin. We are going to begin the paper piecing portion of this block. I will be using an Elmer's glue stick and tacking down my fabric pieces onto my fabric map. The glue stick does release the fabric very, very easily, and I'm just heat setting it with my iron to dry the glue very quickly. And that allows me to maneuver the fabric map and all of the fabric pieces and still keep my place. Now usually if I'm using clothing in my quilts, I do add a stabilizer on the back. Even though I use a very, very lightweight stabilizer, I just did not want to add any more weight to this block. I have several different types of fabric that I'm joining together. Some of them are knits and different woven fabrics, and even a velvet fabric that was a nightgown, and those fabrics are very heavy, so I did not add a stabilizer, and you can see I struggle with how flimsy all of the different materials are. I also have some denim that I'm going to be using for the flowers. And so you can see how quickly the weight adds up with all of these different types of fabrics. Now, even though we are not going to do a step-by-step tutorial with the paper piecing, and I have linked 2 videos that do show a step-by-step process, we are just going to show you the process, and you can get an idea of how everything is pieced together on the fabric map. Going through, I am just trimming to 1/4 inch each piece after it's added to the map. And I do think that I was using the wrong type of needle in my sewing machine for the different fabrics that the clothing is made out of. I was struggling, and you can see that right here. I probably should have changed out the needle. Had a little thread jam there. And get that straight, and then we can continue on. Each time I add a piece of fabric, I open up the map. Oops, I'm not done yet. But each time I add a fabric, I'll open it up, put glue in the next position, finger press the last fabric I added, and then heat set that with the glue. I am using a pressing cloth only because of the different types of clothing. I don't want to scorch or burn any of those. They're not all 100% cotton. So we're just trying to be extra safe. We continue adding the 5th fabric. When I'm sewing my seam, I am sewing right next to the paper fold, and we're not sewing through any of the paper map itself. And this is just one way to do paper piecing. You can certainly sew directly on the fabric map. A lot of paper piecing techniques are just like that. You sew directly on the paper, and then when everything is pieced together, you remove the paper from the back side of your fabric. I tend to like this method only because I can reuse the fabric map over and over again, and I don't have to continually make new paper foundations for my work. And I also don't have to rip the paper off the back when I'm done. The fabric just easily lifts right off of the fabric map at the end. We will be adding the 7th fabric. When choosing out your fabric selection for the paper piecing part of this block, make sure that your fabric extends all areas of the placement for that position, meaning it needs to extend at least a quarter of an inch on both sides of the sewing lines. It needs to extend past the top and the bottom of your fabric map. Continuing on, we will add fabric number 8. And again, this is a very basic foundation paper piecing for this block. I would really love to explore much more intricate blocks done with paper piecing down the road. And you might be familiar with this if you did one of our previous blocks. The Hope block was foundation paper piecing. And so this is exactly the same way that I did that block. Here we go again. A thread jam on my machine. Ordinarily, I would have stopped and investigated why I was having so many issues, but because I was recording video, I just kept on going. If I would have thought about it, I would have changed out the needle. We are getting close to the end. We're going to add the 10th fabric. Make sure right sides are facing together when you're bringing everything to the machine. And the fabric map, if you were piecing in this technique, should be folded up, and you should see the numbers when you bring everything to the machine. We'll heat set the 10th fabric. Trim the seam to 1/4 of an inch, and then add our 11th fabric, which is way too short. So pardon me for a second while I go cut off another piece of this shirt that is long enough to fit. And I'm back, and we're ready to continue on. We'll add this 11th piece of fabric. We will put glue in that position, and then we'll be ready to trim everything to the fabric map itself. Now that we've added all of our fabrics to the 11 places on the fabric map, we are ready to trim off everything that hangs beyond the paper itself. And I'll begin by just trimming off everything that hangs off the bottom, using the paper foundation itself to anchor my foundation paper piece. Then I can simply square up the sides making sure to keep everything at 18.5 inches. And then we make a decision. Ordinarily, if I was using just regular cotton fabric, I would probably turn the edges over and use the fabric map as a template to do a turned edge on my paper piecing. However, because of the fabric being so thick and so stretchy, my seams are very, very thick. To avoid having an even thicker seam by turning the raw edges under, I'm just going to trim everything right to the edge of my fabric map and treat this piece like a raw edge applique. And I'll do a satin stitch to stitch it all down to my background fabric. So go through and clean up all the edges. And now we have our completed paper pieced portion of this block. Now we can simply remove paper backing from the back. We can reuse our paper map. And now we're ready to move on. Bringing in our background fabric, I'm just going to double check to make sure everything fits exactly right with our foundation paper pieced portion of this block. Because we're using clothing, everything is all wiggly jiggly and is not stabilized. Everything fits correctly, and now we're ready to make some stems for our flowers. To make a bias stem for our flowers, I'm going to start with a strip of fabric that has been cut to 1¼ inch wide. And my piece of fabric is cut the same length as the template on page 3 with all of our templates. And now I'm just going to fold my piece of fabric wrong sides together in half lengthwise and give that a good press, and do this for 3 pieces of fabric. Now, of course, I don't want to leave out, you could certainly cut your stems from a piece of fabric that has a fusible on the back. I took my 3 pieces to the sewing machine and I sewed with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down all 3 pieces. And now that we have them away from the machine, I'm going to trim all of the extra seam allowance off very, very close to where all of my stitches are, and get rid of all of that extra bulky seam allowance. And we're ready for a bias bar. Now, a bias bar can be purchased offline. However, I have just made my own by cutting a piece of cardboard about 12 or 14 inches long, and it is 1/4 inch wide. I slide that into the tube that we have created with our 1/4 inch seam. And now I'm just going to roll over that seam until it is now in the middle of the cardboard. So now our seam goes from being on the side of our bias tape to the middle of the back of our bias tape. Once you give that a press, you can simply slide that off of the cardboard. You can see how pretty the right side of that tape is now. Give it a good press, nice and flat, and now you have a perfectly turned edge bias tape. Now we are ready to prepare all of our templates for our flowers. We have our bias tape made for the stems, and we will set those aside. Now we're going to bring in all of our fabrics for the flowers and our Fusible. I am using Heat and Bond Light to do my applique. Now you can see all of my circles I have traced within the large circle. So I have the large circle, the medium-sized circle, and then the very center circle inside the very middle. I did this 3 times for 3 flowers. This method helps reduce the bulk when you are doing layering of several pieces of applique on top of each other. It eliminates a lot of the stiffness that you get when you do multiple layers of applique with a fusible product. I am going to cut out the center. So now our large part of the flower will not have a fusible in the very center. I'll cut out the very small circle, and you can see the middle of that circle will now be hollow. And I do this for all 3 flower templates. It not only reduces the amount of fusible that you use, but it also reduces the bulk and the stiffness in your applique. Once all of my templates were traced on the fusible product, I have fused all of them onto the desired fabrics that I want to use. And now we can just simply cut out all of our shapes directly on the line. And you can see the middle of this denim circle has no fusible product, which will reduce in the stiffness of our applique. See how soft that is? And now we just cut out all of the rest of our shapes. Now all of our prep work is done. We have all of our flower pieces with fusible on the back. We've made our stems and our paper piecing portion of this block. I'm going to come in with my fabric map again using a heat disappearing pen and just trace out the shape of where the grass area goes on this block. That helps me give a good placement for where I'd like to place the flowers. And then I can determine how long I'd like to cut my stems, making sure to leave them a little bit longer so that you can tuck them underneath the grassy area and underneath the largest circle of your flower. I'm just going to come in with a glue stick, and on the back side where you see the stem, apply some glue and just simply put those stems right into position, and we'll dry that glue with the iron here in just a minute. Just like this, and you can see my pen markings disappear. I need those back here in just a minute. Now I can finish lining up all of the pieces for my flowers. Now, several of you know me outside of my quilting videos, and you know my weird sense of humor. I try not to bring it into my quilting videos and keep that separate. However, I do have to just mention this about this block and something that I've noticed about these flowers and the design of them. When I designed this quilt, I really wanted to keep it kind of folk artish, if that's even a genre of quilt design. And I really liked the circle flowers. However, can we just talk about how potentially these flowers could look like body parts? If you haven't already noticed that, I'm just going to call them olive flowers because they look like olives. However, they could also look like body parts. So I probably would have liked to have changed the pink small circle in the very center of my flowers if I would have recognized that in the process of making my blocks. So pay close attention to the colors of fabric that you use for your circles. I do think that my kids will think this block is very, very funny. And it could just be my very weird sense of humor about things. But if you have noticed that about this block, keep that in mind when choosing your fabrics for the center. Now that everything is in place and I can move past that little awkwardness, I'm just fusing all of my pieces down into place. I used glue for the paper piecing portion and just dried that with the iron, and we'll be ready to sew. We are going to come to the machine now and do our satin stitches to finish everything off on this block. I'm going to speed everything up very, very fast. I had thought about leaving this part out of the video because you've seen me do this. However, I do have some viewers who like to see the order in which I stitch everything out, and so I will include it just so you get an idea of how I stitch out this block. I am using a satin stitch, and I've placed a phone book page underneath my block. I did not glue it down, I just laid it simply underneath my block to act as a tearaway stabilizer that will be removed at the end. And you will notice that I'm struggling. Now, many times I've said this before, to check your settings before you start stitching on your actual block. However, I did not follow my own advice, and I just went straight to work stitching along. And the top tension on my thread was very, very tight. Mix that with very thick seams in the paper pieced portion of this block, and you have a great recipe for frustration. I really wish I would have stopped and figured out exactly what was going on, but I just kept on going and did not realize the top tension was so tight until after I was done with the grassy area. Anyway, so I will remind you and remind myself, always check your tension and all of your settings before you bring in your finished work to be stitched down. After the grassy area, I will stitch out both of my leaves with a satin stitch, remembering to do a back stitch at the beginning and the end. And then we will talk for a second about the stems, because I do them right after the leaves because I have green thread going through my machine. If you did a raw edge applique with your stems, remember to do a good solid stitch like a satin stitch on both sides of your stems to really secure that in place and make sure that the fabric does not fray or lift over time. And then if you did a bias tape stem like the ones on this block, and I say bias tape stem, it's really not bias in the real sense because I didn't make sure to cut my strips out to make my stems on the bias. If you did your stems in this manner, then you could use any kind of decorative stitch on your machine, just like I'm going to do right in the middle of my stem. I just picked one of the pretty stitches on my machine and started at the top and went all the way to the bottom of my stem. Remember, if you're using a decorative stitch, that you will need to bring the top threads to the back because usually you don't do a back stitch, and secure them with a knot on the back side of your block. Once the stems are all stitched down into place, I will change out the color of my thread and stitch down my flowers. I'll only be stitching one of the flowers with you, and I usually start with the largest part, and that's the largest circle made out of denim. I will do a satin stitch all the way around that circle and then move to the center circle and stitch that one out. And then we will finish up with the smallest circle in the flower, our olive flowers. Once everything is all stitched down and in place, you can turn your block right side down, remove all of your stabilizer, in this case, our phone book paper. And then make sure to remember to tie off your threads if you've used a decorative stitch. Once everything is removed and tidied up and all your threads are trimmed, you can press your block. In block 7's video, I think that was block 7, I used a towel, or the angel block. I'm losing track of which block was which, but I showed how if you use a towel to press your block, it eliminates a lot of the puckering. Phew, it has been a long day. I just finished removing all of the paper from the back, away from all the stitching, and I gave this block a quick press. I do think I need to press it a little bit more, but I think it turned out very, very pretty. I will say this, using the clothing added a difficulty level and it brought my joy down a couple levels sewing this block. Ordinarily, I love doing paper piecing, and this is very basic, just straight paper piecing, and I usually have a lot of fun doing that. The stretchiness and the thickness of my seams was not so much fun trying to get this block done, and I've done 3 of these today. However, I really do love the way that it turned out, and if I was just using normal regular quilter's cotton, I think I would have enjoyed my day a lot more. So, although we did not walk exactly step by step in the instructions for the paper piecing, we did learn something new with the stems and doing the biased bar, or my biased bar. And then we showed how you can eliminate the bulkiness and the heaviness when doing layering with your Fusible applique. And here is my block number 8. I'm going to post a picture on my Facebook page at Lisa Capen Quilts if you want to share your block number 8 in the comment section of that post. You can also share your pictures on my quilting page, which is a group off of Lisa Capen Quilts, and you can find me, the link to that group will be in the description box as well. I look forward to seeing your pictures. I hope that you have enjoyed the slideshow, and again, if you missed out in this slideshow, there will be another one at the end of this quilt. Well, I am off to have dinner with my parents, and so I really hope that you enjoy this block. I hope you have more fun than I did. And you know me, I am very honest with you. I think, like I said, using your normal fabrics, you're going to absolutely love doing this block. We will see you next Sunday when we do block number 9. Almost done. Have a great week, everyone. Bye.